Hi guys, welcome to Yesterday's Coffee, the podcast where we chat about fitness, nutrition, and business all over coffee that may or may not have been brewed yesterday. And today we're talking all about phytochemicals, all things plant related. I wanted to kind of chat about this topic because I got a question this week about lectins specifically, which we'll talk about in a second. I know that you probably don't get these kinds of questions from your clients.
No, not at all. Half these terms that we're going to cover today, I don't even
Not
really
super
have
familiar
background
with.
in. So this is going to be Alexa's wheelhouse for the most part.
Yeah, absolutely. I tend to get a lot of these questions because it's all from people who read these really clickbaity articles online, whatever's trending in the media, and it just so happens that, for the past several years, lectins have kind of become, I saw an article online today that said lectins might be the new gluten, like the thing that everybody's afraid of.
What are lectins?
Okay, well, first I want to just kind of go over what phytochemicals are. So phytochemicals...
Take lay people like myself through this process.
So plants contain lots and lots of compounds, right? Beyond macronutrients, beyond micronutrients. Mm-hmm. So beyond micronutrients, we have this whole class of compounds considered, or I guess called phytochemicals. So they are not, I am not entirely sure where they fall, like, in the spectrum of, like, chemicals, I guess, like what they're actually made of, because you would have to think they're made of...
They're on the phyto side, right?
Well, yes, obviously, but, like, in terms of their actual chemical structure as being, like, wouldn't there have to be some component of it that's a protein, carb, or fat? I'm just trying to think, like, about the materials
You're
that go into...
You're going to quiz me on biochemistry
Sorry.
right now?
Anyway, that was just something that popped in my brain just now. But
yeah, I don't know.
Anyway, so we'll just call them their own class of chemicals. They're these plant compounds. Some of them that you would probably be familiar with are things like polyphenols or tannins found in wine. Mm-hmm. So there are these different classes of chemical compounds. And under this umbrella of phytochemicals, because these compounds can be both beneficial and potentially have negative side effects. So under this umbrella of phytochemicals, we have something called anti-nutrients. Or should I not talk about that yet?
I mean, we can go into either one.
I kind of had this order in my mind, but then I forgot what order we're going to go in.
I mean, if you're on a roll, keep going.
Okay. So we'll come back to, the positive aspects, but for a second, focused on like the lectins piece because you asked me what those are.
Yeah,
so lectins
keep going with that.
Falls under the umbrella of those anti-nutrients. And anti-nutrients are plant compounds that were designed to be protective to the plant. So just like, animals have survival mechanisms and protective mechanisms, so do plants. And it's not something that everybody realizes or understands, but these mechanisms protect the plant against bacteria, against predators, against animals like us who want to eat the plant.
Yeah.
And the plant is designed to protect the seed so that it can continue to reproduce.
Right. So like the one anti-nutrient that I always talk about, and I can't remember the specific name of this one, but it's the part of brown rice that makes it brown. Whatever that is an anti-nutrient that actually blocks to some degree the absorption of protein.
Well, so the brown part of rice is the bran, but the bran is not an anti-nutrient. So there's probably a compound within the bran.
Right, the compound within the brown rice.
Yes.
Yeah. I can't remember what it's called.
It's probably one of the ones on our list today. I don't know which one specifically when it comes to grains.
I think if I saw it, I'd recognize it. Did you write it in here?
Yeah, I went through a couple here. So the big ones, and some of you guys might recognize these, some may not. Glucosinolates, the only reason that you might recognize that is it blocks iodine absorption in the body. So if you have a thyroid disorder or if you've ever heard that people with thyroid issues shouldn't eat cruciferous vegetables, it's because cruciferous vegetables are high in these compounds. So if your thyroid problem is related to an iodine deficiency or you have a thyroid issue compounded with an iodine deficiency, then, you should potentially limit those foods, but that would probably be the only reason you would recognize that term.
Oh, that's what it is. Phytic acid.
Phytic acid. I was about to say, that's on the list.
Yeah.
Phytates or phytic acid is on the list. That's really prevalent in a lot of whole grains because, again...
brown rice.
The plants are trying to protect their mechanism for reproduction. Mm-hmm. So the bran is what houses all of the living stuff that would help the plant reproduce.
Yeah.
So lectins would be next on the list, and lectins is huge right now. So like I mentioned earlier, that's what I had the question on originally. And there is, I can't remember what his name is, but there's a doctor who published a book saying that lectins are the devil, lectins are the problem for everybody, like lectins are making everybody sick and fat and tired. And so a lot of people are coming to me worried that their weight problem, or digestive sensitivities are related to lectins specifically.
So what are the foods that are lectins?
Lectins are found in tomatoes. That's, I think, one of the largest. Tomatoes, whole grains, and peanuts. And then I believe soybeans. So those four, I guess, are the main, they have the highest amounts of lectins. And there's, websites devoted to avoiding lectins, and there are lists of, low lectin foods. So you can try to avoid these things.
I've honestly never heard of that term before.
Yeah, you should look it up because people are crazy. I mean, I was just skimming through a website today, and it was like the author is so totally against lectins and was like, I wouldn't be caught dead even eating a slice of whole grain bread. Like, it was just like the way he worded it was so funny to me. It's just fear-mongering, and it's unfortunate because a lot of people get caught up in that stuff. And I guess I do have to say, like, for people who have digestive issues or digestive sensitivities, lectins can pose a problem, but I do not believe that every single person is highly sensitive to lectins. It does depend on your exposure, it depends on your diet, depends on your body's state just to begin with.
Well, yeah, it's just like any of these other things that can cause distress within the body, whether you're lactose intolerant or anything else.
Exactly.
Like, if you're not lactose intolerant, you can have all lactose you want. It's not going to be a problem.
Yes.
Same idea with these. Like, if these particular foods and compounds give you issue, then obviously avoid them. But it's not going to be every single person.
Yes.
Probably not even the majority.
Well, and the other thing here, too, is that when people start becoming so afraid of whole groups of foods, whole groups of plant foods specifically, we need diversity of plant foods in our diet to build diversity in our gut bacteria. So our gut bacteria is grown based on plant foods, right? It responds to carbohydrates. Mm-hmm. Carbohydrates are, coming in through plant foods. So if we cut down on the diversity of the things that we eat in our diet, we are therefore cutting down our bacterial diversity, which can cause problems later on down the line. So again, you can experiment, I guess, if you're worried about these things, but I wouldn't be too overly worried, and we'll talk about why in a second. Some of the other ones that you, again, may or may not be familiar with, oxalates, phytates, like Kyle said, found in brown rice and other whole grains, saponins and tannins most notably found in wine, or, full-bodied red wines. So, again, we don't necessarily want to cut these foods out. The reason that these foods are considered to be anti-nutrients is because they block the absorption of nutrients in the body. So typically they're blocking things like iron or calcium or other minerals. Or protein, potentially. So people get really worried about, how they pair these foods together, what they're taking these foods in with. And for the general population who is just trying to eat a variety of plant foods, it's really a non-issue. But the other thing that you can do to kind of get around these issues is to focus on how you're preparing plant foods. Mm-hmm. So cooking technique matters. So this is basically the reason why you would soak grains and beans. So you're not necessarily soaking. A lot of times people think they soak beans to make them cook faster, and that's really not the case. You soak beans so that you can try and extract some of those anti-nutrients.
I've never cooked a bean.
I know. Well, and these are also dried beans. Like, most people don't even cook beans to begin with. Yeah. But some of my older clients understand. Or things like rinsing rice. So people rinse rice to try and extract some of those anti-nutrients, or potentially to extract some arsenic, which is really prevalent in white rice, that we'll talk about in a few minutes. But soaking, rinsing, boiling, and then things like sprouting and fermenting. So we've talked about before how sprouting and fermenting can make foods or certain nutrients more bioavailable. But it also makes those anti-nutrients more digestible. So you have less inflammation that could potentially happen, and then you also have better absorption of those certain nutrients.
So are there benefits to anti-nutrients?
So that's where things get tricky, is because, again, anti-nutrients make it sound like they have no benefit whatsoever, but they're really just called anti-nutrients because they block the absorption of certain nutrients. But these same anti-nutrients have actually been shown to have certain beneficial effects in different situations. So specifically, the phytates, phytic acid, things like tannins, and then even the glucosinolates. So each one of these groups does have some positive benefits. And that's where it's like, okay, we could focus on taking certain things out, but the pros may outweigh the cons in certain situations, especially if they're prepared the right way. So the bottom line is, none of these things are things that you should be overtly avoiding or really thinking too much about. I think variety is key, and then just trying to incorporate, well, for one, making sure you're preparing these foods the right way, rinse your grains or soak your beans. Those are basically the two big ones. And then try to include some sprouted or fermented foods in your diet.
So does preparing it that way get rid of that, or is it fractional, or what are we talking about when you actually do that versus don't do that?
To be honest, well, it does make it's significant. The difference is significant. I don't have numbers for you. I don't have percentages. I don't think it completely wipes away all of those anti-nutrients. So you would still get some of the benefits. Again, I think it's all about finding that fine line between getting enough of the benefits of those phytonutrients, or anti-nutrients, phytochemicals, without having too much of the bad side effects.
Yeah, got it.
So I think people who have digestive issues, this is probably more important to pay attention to, because I think it's a lot more obvious for those people who already have dysfunctional digestion.
Sure. Makes sense.
But each person's different, so you kind of have to figure it out for yourself. But again, all of those anti-nutrients fall under that same umbrella of phytochemicals, and there are other types of phytochemicals that you may have heard of, things like polyphenols, which are found in coffee and tea. Those are the main reasons that coffee and tea has been found to be health-promoting or beneficial for health, is because of their polyphenol content. Lignans is one that can help support hormone balance within the body. That's another one that you might be familiar with or frequently see. But there was actually a study done recently. I think it was just published this year.
The articles are from this year.
Okay, yeah. So I found an overview of this research study when I was just scrolling on Instagram the other day. But I thought it was so interesting because they did a study on a specific extract from spinach. You want to tell us about it? Because I know you read this.
Yeah, so this, if you've been struggling to hang on up to this point, I'm right there with you. There's a lot of big words that we're throwing around right now, and we're going to throw a few more at you, but it's going to be pretty interesting. So there is a compound in spinach called, I think I'm pronouncing this right, ecdysterone, which is a phytosteroid, so it's a naturally occurring compound that is very similar in its structure to cholesterol. And funnily enough, this is actually, it was deemed in the 1980s by researchers as the Russian secret, because this was being supplemented by...
I didn't read that part. That's interesting.
By some of the Russian Olympic teams. And so this phytosteroid that's found in spinach has been shown to cause significant increases in muscle mass and, in this particular study, 1 rep bench press maxes. And so it was funny because this is an actual quote from the article. New research has examined the potential of spinach extract as an enhancer of athletic performance. The active compound in spinach extract significantly improves muscle strength, leading the study authors to recommend banning the supplement in sports.
That was my favorite part of the whole article. They are honestly recommending, these researchers are not suggesting, not toying with the, they are recommending that this compound be put on the banned substances list.
They were saying that ecdysterone should be added to the list of prohibited substances in sports because of its efficacy. And so I was...
which is really interesting and cool.
Well, and so beyond that, so obviously as you get into these derivatives of steroids, we know that steroids have beneficial effects, but most of them also have very negative effects. One of the interesting components of this is that when, in at least this recent study, when the participants were going through it, they were taking blood and urine samples, and they showed no signs of liver or kidney toxicity. So the androgenic side effects that are typically involved in anabolic steroids were not present in the short period of time that this particular study was happening. So basically a lot of the bang without any of the negatives to it.
Yeah, which is really cool because they were using a pretty high amount of this particular compounds, like to the point where if you were trying to eat spinach to get these effects, you would have to eat, what did it say, between 2 and 15 pounds of spinach?
No, it was higher. So there were, because they also played around with the dosages, and I think the equivalent of the high dosage would have been anywhere between 2 and 16 kilograms of spinach.
Oh yeah. So like 30 pounds.
Yeah.
So like you're 30 pounds of spinach.
Upwards of 35 pounds of spinach.
Yeah.
So obviously it's impossible to eat that much. You'd have to supplement with it. So I was actually,
you'd have some bad side effects if you really did try to eat that much spinach at one time.
There's no way you could get 36 pounds of food in your body, much less spinach.
I guess that's true. I mean, it kind of all withers
Can you imagine
away to
eating
nothing.
30 pounds of anything?
No. No.
Much less something that would take up that much space.
Yeah.
Anyways.
You're right. Well, where would you even buy 30 pounds of spinach? Like now.
You would have to obviously supplement with it. And so it's completely legal. You can go out and buy it. I was looking
hard to find though,
into, and I only just looked into it today. I was actually struggling to find different outlets that were actually selling it. Amazon had something that was out of stock, and then the only place that I was really seeing a bunch of stuff was actually eBay with sellers from the UK, which is actually where the study was carried out, was in the UK. And then I've also seen references to it in articles on Muscle and Fitness and stuff like that. So it's been kind of, I would say, under the radar. I hadn't heard about it. But then again, I mean, apparently the Russians were hopping on board this stuff in the 80s. That's
really funny to me. That is so crazy.
Yeah. So there is some serious truth to Popeye.
Yeah. Which is, it's just so cool to me. That's
so actually, I'd be interested to know if the creators of Popeye knew anything about that, or if that was just a weird coincidence. Because I mean, especially like the 80s. I don't know when Popeye was created. I'd assume it's probably even older than that.
I'll be honest, I don't know, and I don't know much about Popeye.
I don't know, but just kind
maybe
of an
our parents will tell us
there.
after they watch this.
I'm sure we can look it up.
Or my grandma. So
that's the
that study was really, really cool. I just lost my train of thought. But yes, that's the beneficial side of all of these plant chemicals and just plant foods in general. And again, most of your diet, I personally think most of your diet should be coming from plant foods just for the variety of nutrients and the health benefits. So again, even though you can't get these same exact effects from eating spinach still has valuable nutrients and health benefits for you. On the other side, and this is where plants get a little trickier, and again, something that's not, I think, super well known, is the fact that plants, especially plants that have good detoxifying effects, right? So like these vegetables that people eat to enhance their body's natural ability to detoxify, plants can also work that way on the ground, if you follow.
I'm kind of lost.
So plants can absorb certain toxins and heavy metal compounds from the soil as they're growing, just because, just the way that the plant is made, right? So one thing that I just saw recently was Dr. Hyman recently put out a podcast and just briefly mentioned the fact that kale might not be as healthy as you think, and kale is super high in thallium, which is a heavy metal, and people were going crazy. So just in case any of you have heard that or watched that and were confused or, thrown off and are wondering if kale, this long-known superfood, is now all of a sudden terrible for you, the short answer is that you shouldn't worry about it. It's not as big of a deal as it's thought to be. It is true that it is one of the highest thallium containing plants.
Mm-hmm.
So that is true. But when it comes to heavy metals and when it comes to compounds leached from the soil into plants, it does depend on region. It depends on where it's grown. It depends on the conditions. So that makes all of this really tricky. And if we were really trying to pay that close of attention to every single thing that our plant food picked up, we would probably be going crazy. But heavy metal toxicity is real and it can be a big health problem for a lot of people. So it's good to be informed, I guess.
Yeah.
Another big one that is, I think, commonly known is that rice is actually the highest plant in arsenic. It contains the highest amount of arsenic.
I have heard that.
Which, coincidentally, rinsing your rice can also help pull out some of that arsenic, as well as boiling. So going back to some of those preparation methods from before, in order to circumvent some of these heavy metal issues.
What about rice cooking?
That's a good question. You should still always rinse your rice beforehand. Which
Do you like that verb I just invented?
Rice cooking? Yeah, I mean, it didn't even faze me. So.
I know, you just didn't even give me a reaction.
I like homemade words. You should probably still rinse it. Yeah. But as long as the water that we use is not high in arsenic specifically, then using a rice cooker shouldn't be a big deal.
But is it the same effect you're going to get from boiling?
Yes. So the only difference is I think they recommend, you know how you can boil rice to dry, basically, all the water in the pot goes into the rice.
Yeah.
They recommend not doing that if I guess they recommend not boiling if you know that your water is high in arsenic, but they recommended free boiling it. So I guess straining the rice after, because anything that leaches into the water would be discarded.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
But I think that comes down to water quality.
But in the rice cooker, you don't have leftover water.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So I think if we have good quality water, it should be fine.
Oh, got it.
Is what I'm saying. The actual action of boiling, I mean, your rice still technically boils inside the rice cooker.
Right, that's what I figured.
Yeah.
So
that's the same.
Yeah.
But anyway, again, going back to just making sure that you're preparing your plant foods in a variety of different ways, aiming to use some of those cooking methods. And then actually cilantro is a really big heavy metal detoxifier. So again, a varied diet. There are a lot of these other, foods.
So Chipotle's got it down with the cilantro lime rice.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, you should put cilantro in everything. I don't know how much, to be honest. I don't know how much you have to use or, how to consume it. But I think when we're talking about this kind of stuff, again, it comes back to variety, how you prepare, and just trying to eat more plants in general. But I just wanted to throw that in there as a side note because I listened to Dr. Hyman and I didn't know if anybody else did. So
yeah, we run
I didn't want everybody
totally different fitness circles.
To freak out about the fact that kale is all of a sudden on a no list, which another side note, that was taken from, I think it was an article or a book published by a doctor in California a few years ago in 2015 who did not conduct any he researched himself, but he didn't do any official research. It wasn't peer reviewed. It wasn't set up, in a research study fashion.
Mm-hmm.
He was basically observing his patients and their lab values. He did do some testing on vegetables in the area of California that he was from. Noticed that they were high in thallium. Noticed his patient's blood work was high in thallium and that they were, experiencing some symptoms of thallium overload or thallium toxicity. So that's not something that could potentially be generalized.
Yeah.
But just something interesting.
So I don't know about you, but I'm going to look more into the ecdysterone. Is that what I called it?
Yeah, maybe you should do your own research on it.
Yeah, I'm going to
do your own test.
Because I spent 15 minutes looking for it. So I'll probably see if I can find something that people are actually using. And the other thing is going to be figuring out the dosage. I saw some different metrics around 2 to 3 milligrams per pound and stuff like that. Because there is a fair bit of information on it. It's still pretty under-researched as far as human trials go.
Yeah.
So that's why this more recent study was fairly interesting. But that's going to be something I'm checking up on.
Yeah. Well, I hope you guys were able to follow that kind of, sort of. It was more of just like an FYI for anybody who did have questions.
On plant stuff.
Because a lot of the things that I talked about are just things that are clickbait a lot of the time. So there's truth to some of it, not truth to the rest of it, just like anything else. But thank you guys so much for listening. If you have any topics you want covered or have any questions for us, you can reach out to me at therootedrd.com or to Kyle at hypertrofit.com. But we will see you guys next week.
See you guys again next week.